Next, let's briefly talk about the difference between GPT 3.5 Turbo and GPT-4. These are the two choices that we currently are presented with when we open up ChatGPT. And if you don't have an account, you haven't signed up, don't worry, that's all coming up next. But as you can see here, I have GPT 3.5, technically it's called 3.5 Turbo, and GPT-4 as my options. One thing I have to start by saying is that GPT-4 is currently only available to Plus users. So we'll talk about at the end of this video whether it's worth it or not, or if you need to be a Plus user. The spoiler answer is not really, you don't need it, but if you want access to some of the best, coolest features, then you do have to pay for it. So what's the distinction here? According to just a little pop-up here, GPT 3.5 Turbo is the fastest model and is great for most everyday tasks. GPT-4 is more capable and more creative and better at advanced reasoning. Plus, it has some of these extra features down here that aren't available to GPT 3.5 users. So again, GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. GPT 3.5 Turbo is a finely tuned version of the older model GPT-3. And there are earlier versions of GPT, by the way. We don't have access to them using ChatGPT, but using the APIs, you can communicate with GPT-3 if you wanted to. But with ChatGPT, we have two choices, 3.5 Turbo and GPT-4. GPT-4 is an entirely new model. A lot of the details around it are not public as far as how it was trained, the size of the model, the number of parameters. There's a lot of stuff that has just not been talked about. But the short story is that it's better. It's a much larger model, trained on more information, and tends to give better results in certain areas. According to OpenAI's marketing page for GPT-4, they call it their most advanced system that makes safer and more useful responses. So some of the things that GPT-4 is better at include writing really finely tuned language, more human language that doesn't feel always like it's coming out of ChatGPT. It still is sometimes easy to identify any text generated by ChatGPT, but it's harder to do so with GPT-4. It's better at complex problem solving. I'll show some examples of that. It's better at generating code because it's not publicly shared, but it's likely that it was trained on a heck of a lot more code than GPT 3.5. And probably most importantly, it's better at being factual, not making things up when it doesn't know. It's a topic called hallucination that we'll talk about soon. One downside, by the way, is that GPT-4 tends to be slower. And GPT 3.5, as they say on the marketing page, or on the ChatGPT page, is that it's their fastest model. And in a lot of cases, it performs just as well as GPT-4. One of the cases where it does not perform as well is in standardized tests. So if we look at the bar exam, the exam you take to become a lawyer, or does it make you a lawyer if you pass? I think so. Anyway, has to do with law. What they call ChatGPT is GPT 3.5 Turbo. It was in the 10th percentile of students on the bar exam versus GPT-4 was in the 90th percentile. So big difference here when we're talking about reasoning, standardized tests, that sort of thing. Additionally, GPT-4 is safer and it's more likely to be factual and also to not respond to inappropriate or disallowed content, which is another subject we'll talk a little bit more about soon. It's much harder to jailbreak, to get around any sort of the walls that OpenAI has put in place. And then finally, this is a pretty big difference. GPT-4 behind the scenes is multimodal, meaning that it's not just a text-to-text model. You can provide images as input. You can provide videos and files, and it can respond with images, videos, files, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Currently, though, most of that functionality is not available through ChatGPT. I'm pretty positive will be unveiled in the coming months. But right now, you can basically provide text to GPT-4 via ChatGPT, or if you use the code interpreter, which is brand new and really fun and by far my favorite feature of ChatGPT, you can upload files and images and zip folders and PDFs, but there's still a lot of capability that has not been unleashed on the world just yet. And GPT-4 supports plugins, the code interpreter, and web browsing until like a couple days ago when web browsing was temporarily suspended because people were abusing it. We have a whole section to talk about that as well. So, of course, the problem here with GPT-4 is that it's not available for free. It's only available to ChatGPT Plus subscribers. The question is it worth it? Do you need it? My answer is that it really depends. You need it if you want to follow along with every single part of this course. But the first 80% of our ChatGPT content will work with GPT 3.5 on the free tier or GPT-4. The sections on the code interpreter and plugins and web browsing, you will have to pay in order to have access to those features. And as far as how GPT 3.5 Turbo performs, it does very well in most situations, unless you're trying to get it to pass a standardized test. You're trying to work on, some really high complex reasoning and logic problems. It works great for most writing situations. So it is not a necessity. But if you plan on using ChatGPT and incorporating it into your workflows daily, I think it's worth it to pay the $20 a month, which is what it currently costs, to get access to ChatGPT Plus, which gives you early access to beta features, and then, of course, GPT-4. My recommendation would be if you have the $20 and you're serious enough about it, try it for 1 month. See if it's worth it. Definitely, it's not a requirement, and you can get through most of this course without it. But if you want to use every possible feature, including the code interpreter, then you do need to pay $20 a month. Okay,